Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecini. We are presented by The Athletic. Today on the show, look, I know that it's Scoot Vic holiday. I know we're excited. I know we're ready to get going on 2023 NBA draft season in earnest. But Spins and I are going to talk about that on Friday on the podcast particularly. There's a chance that I do a live stream after the Scoot Vic show tonight as it is. But before we do that, it's a Wednesday pod on Tuesday night here. I've got Mark Schindler in the building. Mark is one of my favorite just people talking, writing about basketball. I think he is so smart at thinking about the game. It's obviously not just the NBA. You can tell by how people translate across covering different types of basketball, how smart they are. And Mark has been incredible giving great WNBA coverage. He's been great writing about NBA young players, writing about draft prospects over the last couple of years. I am a big fan of Mark. So Mark is here. We're going to talk about 2022-23 NBA breakout players. And the way this is going to go, before I introduce him, we're going to talk about three guys each. We're going to go back and forth. I don't know Mark's guys. Mark might have an indication of my guys just because the thumbnail exists, right? So I've kind of had to give a little bit of a take. But I am excited to talk about this. We're going to go back and forth. We're each going to pick three guys, and we're going to talk about six guys in total that we're excited to see have a breakout season. Mark, with all that being said, 90 seconds later, how's it going, man?
It's good. I don't know how I'm supposed to live up to that intro, but I appreciate it, man. I've been listening to the pod for a while, so it was cool when we finally connected a couple months ago, I guess now. Let me just say, I have no idea what's happened since about April. I feel like I check my phone daily, like what day of the week is this? I think I had, and this is not meant as a flex, it's more just how my work went. I went from somebody who'd flown, typical Midwest person who'd flown about like 6 times in my life prior to the summer. And I had 14 round trips from August to the end of September. So yeah, man, we're living life. Basketball is I have like a slight reprieve because FIBA Women's World Cup just ended and now we're in preseason. So I'm here, man. I'm ready for this. I do know now who your guys are, but I'm excited. It makes me even more excited to get in mine. So
yeah, it's funny. Like I'm same as you. Like grew up in the Midwest. My wife just fucking roasts me all the time for like, how did you not travel? Because people, as people know, Laura's from Australia, and people who aren't from the Midwest or aren't from the United States, they travel more. Like they get out more. I didn't have a passport until I was like 20, maybe 25,
wow. Okay.
Something like that. Like did not really travel all that much outside of the country. I went to Canada. That was really it. But now look at me. I live in freaking Australia. Here's where we are. Mark, before we get into giving specific names, I want to just kind of define what a breakout player is, because the GM poll came out today, and one of the questions that were asked of the NBA's 30 general managers was this idea of who's going to be the biggest breakout player this year. And their answers, I think, are reasonable. They're just not how I would necessarily define breakout. Like their most likely player to have a breakout season in 2022-23 was Evan Mobley. He got 21% of the votes. Number 2 was Cade Cunningham and Anthony Edwards. Number 4 was Zion Williamson. I kind of think those guys have all already broken out. Like Evan Mobley, I thought had a real case to be an all-star last year. Zion Williamson has been an all-star already. I know that he's not been top of mind because of his injury history. Anthony Edwards averaged 20 points a game. And I mean, for the love of God, watch his playoff games last year. Like that was a breakout if there ever was one. And then Cade, if you would have watched the last 30 games of the Pistons season last year, which I get that not a lot of people did, but like I did. And I feel like I kind of saw it when he averaged like 19, 5 and 5 already. So when I define breakout players, I guess I'm thinking of something a little bit different, but everyone has their own definition. Mark, what would you define as a breakout?
I think it's tough because, I try and I'm in the same line as you. I think especially looking at like Cade, Scotty, like both those guys to me, like completely broke out last year. Like I think Evan is, I'm not gonna lie, Evan is one of my guys, but for more reasons. Actually, I have a piece coming out about this week. But I think it's just tough because, like, especially like you mentioned with Cade, like that dude got significantly better every month. Like he just honed 2 or 3 skills and kept improving. Like Scotty, I mean, I'll never forget watching Scotty's first summer league game, and I was like, "Well, what the fuck do I know about scouting?" Like, I just remember like thinking everything I thought. I was like, "Scotty's gonna be a great role player." I have questions about the self creation, like the touch and everything, and then he's taking fadeaways, 3
From
minutes in the summer league, and I was like, "All right, you know what, whatever." But again, like I think, and that's not to say that he's not going to be a star, but more like, I mean, his leap last year was like, to me, I'm already cemented. Like, I know that guy's on a track to be something.
Yeah.
I think it's probably more about how a guy is talked about almost like, and that's going to play into another one of my guys, who I think already broke out last year, but I think this is the year that people are really going to notice it. So I don't know. I guess again, like it depends on every single player. Like to me, Zion being on there is laughable because wasn't he All NBA or like just about? I remember I had him All NBA.
If he didn't make All NBA, he was like 16th place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you look at some of the other names here. Anthony Davis got a vote here. Yeah, Rudy Gobert got a vote here. Anthony Davis made the 75 team, like the NBA 75 team. Like, how is that a breakout? Jalen Green, like I didn't really think about Jalen Green for this because I thought that he was great over the course of the last 30 games last year. Tyrese Halliburton was great when he got to Indiana. Tyrese Maxey had phenomenal playoff series. Ben Simmons has made 2 All-NBA teams. I don't know. Like, I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said it's how people are talked about in a big way. Like, Franz Wagner had ostensibly a better all-around season than Jalen Green last year. He was a more impactful defender. He was more efficient. He just kind of did everything at a slightly higher level over the course of the full season last year than Jalen Green, which is why he made the all rookie team ahead of Jalen Green in terms of voting. But nobody talks about him. And like nobody considers him in the same class as Jalen Green. I think really up until recently, I think the Eurobasket stuff actually maybe in our circles changed that conversation a little bit, but it is hard. I get that it's a hard definitional thing, but I just firmly believe that like, I don't know, like if Jalen Green averaged 24 points, 25 points a game this year, I wouldn't be surprised, but I guess that would be a breakout, right?
Yeah, I think it's tough too because again, like he was not quite at like the same level of Cade, but like he went from somebody who like the first half of the season, his pacing, his tempo was just like everything was a million miles an hour, and then post All-Star break, it felt like something just clicked for him, and he was incredible. I think he averaged like 23, 24 points per game over the last 24 games, I think. And like I mean, that's somebody who I still view as like he's going to lead the NBA in scoring at some point. That's just kind of for me, like it's just going to be a matter of time. He grew as a passer, grew as a creator overall. So yeah, I agree. Like he already broke out. So unless he's like averaging like, 29, 30 points per game this season, I don't know if I view him as like a breakout candidate because he already did that for me last year.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess let's start. I'll give my first name. My first name was Franz Wagner, and it's not because Franz isn't very good. Look, this podcast is firmly Slap the Bag 2022. Franz, we're going all in. Every time Franz makes a 3, I expect everyone to hashtag Slap the Bag 2022 or 2023. We're all in on Franz. The thing is, I feel like nobody noticed him last year when he was incredible. And I think he has a very real chance to make the All-Star team this year. That's my guy that I brought up earlier when I said, we talked about this off camera, I guess, or off stream. I said to you, I have 2 guys that I think are going to emerge into like real strong players, high level starters, and then one guy that I think can jump into being an all-star. Franz is the guy for me that I think has a legit chance to be an all-star. You watch what he was capable of doing at the Eurobasket level. It looked like he had leveled up substantially, even in terms of pacing, in terms of just comfort overall. Those are highly, highly competitive games. And I get that the spacing is a little bit different in Eurobasket kind of competition. I get that the athleticism levels are a little bit different there. But I think that with the additions of guys like Paulo, with the improvement of guys like Jalen Suggs, I think there's a very, very real chance that we see Franz become the number one option this year and be the guy on a much better Magic team than what people are expecting maybe.
Yeah, it's funny too because I'm not all the way in the like they're gonna make the play-in. I've seen some people say that. I'm not there, but I think they're gonna be like, to me, like 34, 35 wins feels about right for this team. Because I think, I mean, even just watching last night, like they're gonna have some clear hiccups and issues that go on in the half court, but there's also like, I mean, part of this is as you got into your pod with the 3-man weave, like, I mean, that team wasn't exactly, I mean, that Duke team wasn't exactly great at getting Powell the ball in places that made sense in a modern setting. And I think, you know, in like 18 minutes of the first half last time, like, yeah, he's already been used in more inventive ways than he was most of the Duke season. Like, I'm just excited to see what that looks like. And I agree. I think with Franz, like last year, I was really high on him because I thought, even if like, I mean, there still were some of the shooting hesitancies last year, which honestly, I think it's more just, and someone I was talking to, not as meant as a flex, but like I was talking to Jonquel Jones about this during the finals. Like, and for people who aren't aware, like Jonquel, MVP of the WNBA 2 years ago, incredible shooter at 6'6", but also really capable of putting the ball on the floor. And she's still someone who like tries to figure out what is the balance between driving and shooting. And I think that's gonna be huge for Franz this year, especially on a team that their spacing still kind of needs to be figured out. And he is arguably the best shooter in the starting lineup. So I'm interested to see what that looks like, because I think it's just adding like a half beat of decisiveness instead of having some of that almost like thinking too much about doing it. And it's kind of ridiculous to think about what that could look like for him if he's shooting 6 or 7 threes per game instead of, you know, checking out of some of those. And as good as the drives can be, because I'm a big proponent of redrives and just continuing possessions, but there are more opportunities for him to really shoot the ball and take advantage of that. And like you mentioned with Eurobasket, I mean, I never quite know what to take away from international play sometimes, which, you know, it feeds into a guy who ended up not making my list. But like, yeah, I totally see it. Like if he averaged 20 points plus per game this season, I don't think I'd be too surprised.
I think that's where I'm at. I think he's going to average 20 plus. You know, we have a question here from LMFFFAAAO in the YouTube chat asking, how do you think the depth chart is going to work for the Magic? I mean, the answer is I have no fucking idea. Yeah. But like, I think that the guy that like kind of gums up the works there more than anything is Jonathan Isaac. If Jonathan Isaac ever comes back, like I actually think the depth chart is like somewhat sensible if he doesn't return. Like you get, you know, 48 minutes from Wendell Carter and Mo Bamba. You get 30 minutes from Paulo, and then maybe slide Wendell Carter down to the 4 sometimes. You maybe slide Franz down to the 4 occasionally. You maybe slide him up to the 2 sometimes. You play Franz at the 3 most of the time. Obviously, their backcourt, you have guys like Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony that are going to play the 1 and the 2. And then Gary Harris is out for a little while now as well. So like, I get the role concerns, but I actually think that like in terms of finding like your 8 or 9 guys that you're going to go with, I think they might be okay in that regard early in the season. And it'll allow someone like Franz, particularly as like the top of the food chain, to be able to like really establish himself in a big way.
Yeah, in some ways too, I almost feel like, not that it's never really good that there are injuries, but I think in some ways it's almost good that they're going to be forced to really play big. And I think put the ball in Franz's hands more, especially like you mentioned, like Gary Harris was huge for them last year and what he was able to do as a secondary creator and just be an active guard for them. Because I don't, again, not intended to slander, but like I am not a believer in the RJ Hampton running bench units train, which maybe they do that just to keep their
I think that what you do is you have Cole Anthony that can run the bench unit this year. And look, like honestly, he might start at point too, because I forgot.
Yeah, especially I just announced with Markelle out for a little bit
in September. Too. Yeah, that Markelle has like what is it, a broken toe, if I remember correctly. So. So yeah, like it's tricky. It's a really tricky one. So yeah, I agree with you. The RJ Hampton bench experience is not going to go well. I don't want that.
Yeah, and I just think in some ways it's going to force the ball into just forcing a lot more pick and roll playmaking from your bigs, which I'm excited about. Like some people saw Paolo playing the 3 yesterday, like, oh, that shouldn't happen. Like, no, man, I love it. Like, let's just see it. Why not? It's his rookie year. It's preseason.
Yeah.
I don't care. Just play funky, figure it out.
Why
They're almost my
wouldn't you do
number one
that?
team to watch.
Just do that early in the season too. And
Yeah.
here's the thing with drafting Paulo and Franz, both of whom are 6'10". Have you seen Paulo in person yet?
I have not. I need
It's
to.
hard to explain how big he is. I wasn't sure if you went to summer league or not.
I was at summer league, but I was honestly, it's funny. I feel like I was at summer league and I think I caught one game in person. So it was like, one of those things, but
yeah, like Paulo is like fucking huge. Like we'll be able to play the 5 at some point, I think. Like that's the biggest thing. Like I saw him at the Final Four. It's just like, oh my God. And I've seen him previously before that, like Nike Basketball Academy, places like that. You don't really recognize how big Paulo is until you see him in person. I've said that on the podcast a couple of times. The thing with Franz and Paulo though is that they're incredible ball handlers at that size. So like you can afford to do something like start Jalen Suggs and Terrence Ross. And while neither of those guys are like high level point guards necessarily, like at least Suggs isn't yet, as much as I love Jalen and I'm still all in on the Jalen Suggs experience at this point. They're not like high level, going to get everyone involved in all of the right places immediately from the jump guys at this point of their careers. Having guys like Franz and Paulo that can really handle the ball, that can initiate sets, it allows you to get a little bit creative on offense and run some things in the half court that, you can allow Jalen just to be the superstar in transition that he's capable of being and run the court that way. You can allow Franz to like come up from the corner off of like a screen from Paulo. You can have Paulo like just kind of duck in and try and get a seal on a switch because he's huge. And the guy that's guarding Franz at the 3 is probably still even a mismatch for Paulo. And then you can have Franz come up. You can have him take like a ball screen and just kind of roll offense that way. And, you have to hope that Jalen Suggs' shooting comes around in a somewhat substantial way. And I have some faith in that. Like, I think he's a worker. I think that we saw some good shooting indicators at Gonzaga. I think that last year was just kind of a mess with the hand injury and, a number of different factors there. So I don't know. Like, I think that they can get creative offensively in large part because of the marginal efficiencies or marginal inefficiencies, I guess, that Paulo and Franz allow for you in terms of size against other opponents.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think, even just like pointing to what they did last night, like there was a ton of, okay, Paolo is bringing the ball up in transition and they have guards out of corners setting pin-ins. So you can you're forcing a late switch and it's not even about like open. I think so many times people see stuff like even just like going to the Phoenix Milwaukee series, everybody talks about like, oh, well, Brook Lopez is switching and he's getting cooked. Like, no, he's switching, they're getting cooked behind him. And I think that's so much more what it is for me about Orlando. It's not about necessarily having these giant mismatch battles. It's more about like when you have guys with size who can play make and handle like that. I think it just creates so many more opportunities to really rearrange what the chessboard looks like defensively for a team. Like we saw the Cavs do this last year. Like I honestly like the Cavs playing so big, but being able to just play simplistically was what made that offense, even if it wasn't perfect, like it was effective. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, high lows were just insane. And I think we're going to see a lot of the same stuff with the Magic, but even more expansion in the playbook. If you want to move off France, I can talk about my Magic guy now because I think this.
Oh, you have a guy on the Magic too.
I do have a guy on the Magic. I
almost asked you about this because I had a strange sneaking suspicion that you were going to.
I tweet about him like every day, so it's hard for me to not have him on the list.
Yeah, give me the name.
Wendell Carter Jr.
Okay, I thought it was going to be Suggs because I see you tweet about Suggs a decent amount too.
I love Suggs, but yeah, for me it's Wendell. I just like I don't know. Maybe I'm partially biased because I feel like this entire summer everybody's been trying to use him as a trade chip when he was Orlando's best player last year, pretty much the entire season. A lot of people like to point to Obama and say that he's the reason that Orlando's defense was so good. And like, no, man. Well, A, watch Wendell, and B, look at the rim protection numbers too. Like he grew incredibly as a rim protector and just defensive player overall last year. Part of that is, not playing in a blitz everything defense, believe it or not, useful. But I think the biggest thing
I can't believe that someone did that.
that
I
was
honestly
what a
can't.
time to be alive. Jim Boylan
Fucking
just
Jim
should go
Boylan.
coach college. That should be a thing. But in
No,
terms of
don't put
well,
him
I mean,
around
I'm
kids.
not putting that on college kids, but I'm just saying that's very much his speed. But like looking at Wendell though, like his handle got so much better last year. Like that was the biggest thing for me. And he got to a point again, it's less about being a quote unquote mismatch nightmare, but he got to the point where he was too strong for any four to really guard him if he was able to get them and just catch in the mid post and go. He had like very little hesitation in his game, especially compared to what it was looking like in Chicago. He got up more volume from three, and I think there's still room for that to continue to improve. Again, like kind of like I mentioned with talking about like JJ and Franz, like finding that balance of like, okay, am I going to go set a flare screen or like, make this turn this into a quick DHO, quick hitter, or am I going to take the shot? Like, I think there's some room to improve that. But in terms of his aggression, attacking the basket and out of face-ups, I was incredibly impressed with it. I think this year to me is going to be more about with hopefully better spacing in the offense and just a little bit more dynamism in it overall. I think that there is real room for him to continue with that and being somebody who, with what he showed last year in terms of really taking the reins and being an aggressive player, like I don't know that he's necessarily going to be an all-star this year, but I do think he's trending towards that. Like to me, I thought he was a top 50 player last year. I think if he's able to keep improving his craft around the rim, which is going to be the biggest hindrance to him, becoming a more high-level scorer. To me, I'm there with him becoming a near all-star level player. And I just think like this year, I really hope people get to realize how special of a player he is. Like, I don't love talking just about numbers and contracts, but I think automatically I would list him as one of like, if you're excluding rookie contracts, because that's cheating.
Oh yeah, no, this is a bargain. This
he
is
has like one of the best
yeah.
contracts in the league in terms of what actual return value is going to be. And I think he just turned 25 or 24. No.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh no, he just turned. He's 23. What am I talking about? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no,
like,
he turns 24 somewhat soon. Yeah.
So he's really, really good. A lot's going to depend on the three continuing to grow, but I'm a big believer in him.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Wendell too. The guy that people compared Wendell to pre-draft was Al Horford all the time, right? Like that was just the guy, and he is going right along that trajectory. Like every single step of the way, it feels like. You mentioned a lot of like the weird, DHO stuff, the rescreen actions, coming off and, setting off-ball screens for guys that are just like really smart, just like these little like shimmy screens almost, where like he just like kind of steps up and like catches a guy like and gets his feet set real quick to be able to get Franz, for instance, free, or to be able to get Terrence Ross free coming up from the corner, right? Like it's just like it's little stuff like that he does that it doesn't show up in the box score. It's really sharp. And then on top of it, like the thing that people always expected from Wendell was the shooting, right? Like the shooting is what really opens up his game in like a pretty substantial modern way, right? Al Horford, it took Al Horford a while to like really become like a legit three-corner three-point shooter, or a legit, I'm going to take this pick and pop and knock down a shot, right? Like it just wasn't a huge part of his repertoire when he was 22, 23. It became one as he moved to the Celtics, right? Wendell's picking that up earlier in his career. And because of how much dexterity he has with the ball, because of how quickly he seems to process actions, it just allows you to flow into so many different offensive sets. And, to go back to our previous conversation about Franz and Paulo in the way that they kind of just allow for so many different mismatch nightmares for you, it is a little bit weird insofar as like, you're going to be able to switch a lot of those Franz, Paulo, Wendell actions, right? In like a strange way that might not be as much of like a mismatch situation, but you might almost be better off like running like 1-5s for Wendell as opposed to like the weird 4-5s and 3-5s that I think you and I like as like basketball nerds, we want to get super fucking creative and be like, let's do all this wild shit, right? And like not even that's like wild shit anymore, but like it's different and not every coach runs it, right? I wonder with Wendell, I wonder with the Magic, like you're going to be able to do a lot of wild shit, but like you're also going to want to like try and create as many mismatches and foster as many like strange situations. it's weird. I'm trying to like navigate in my head what they're going to look like as we're talking. And I just don't know, I guess.
Yeah, it's funky because especially too, like, I mean, that's one of my favorite parts about like Wendell's one of the 10 best screeners in basketball.
Yeah,
Like,
he's unbelievable.
So good at it.
Unbelievable.
And I think to me, like, it's like you were just mentioning, I think trying to find, especially like, it's not like, I think that there's almost been too much of a course correction that like ball stopping is bad. Sometimes you are just that freaking good. Like Powell's going to get
like Trae Young should have the ball in his hands all the time. Exactly. That's why I'm like a little bit worried about the DeJounte fit because like there's probably diminishing returns on taking the ball out of Trae's hands and putting it in DeJounte's hands.
Exactly. And I think for me, like over the next couple of years, seeing how Orlando tries to find that, like finds more of like, okay, we're going to be in a flow while also knowing that we can really, because I mean, they're going to be, they're such an inside out team, which I'm excited about because I love watching inside out basketball with, I mean, they have like 3 really gifted interior passers already. But again, like I think especially with Wendell, his shot coming along even further, and you know, being somebody who, especially like if he gets a 3 on him or 4 on him, like I trust him to take it to the post, and even if he's not getting the ball in the basket, like he's getting fouled. He's just so strong for most people and quick enough to do it. So yeah, I'm very excited, especially too, like defensively. Like he's not technically a 4, but like I'm comfortable with him playing on a lot of 4s. Especially when you're looking at, you know, if he's able to play help side. You know, he defended Joel Embiid probably the best that anybody did one-on-one last year, which granted, that's not everything, but I think he's really shown his mettle as an actual post defender. And I mean, going at Embiid offense with those, it was very late season, but I think they played 2 games within like 4 or 5 days of one another against the Sixers in like February last year. And those were 2 of Wendell's brightest games. So, yeah, I'm very excited to see this Magic team play, man. I could just list off all the Magic players, and hopefully this is Chuma Okeke's year, but we'll see.
Yeah, like it is interesting. Like I'm trying to pull up like the on-off numbers. Like I think that one of the things that, you know, the Cavs taught us last year, right, in terms of defense is just how valuable it is to have length out there, right? Yeah. How valuable it is just to have that, you know, constant presence of rim protection. If a team pulls Jared Allen away from the basket, having Evan Mobley there on the weak side. But to do that and to make that work, you have to have this guy that is capable of switching, that is incredibly technically sound, that is incredibly smart rotationally. I think that Carter, while he's nowhere near as, you know, mobile and as athletic as Mobley, his technical defensive skills are just so high level in terms of his footwork and in terms of, again, his processing ability. Like he is just really sharp. I know that, like, you know, people on the podcast probably got sick of listening to Cole Zwicker talk about how fucking good Wendell Carter was in terms of processing the game before Cole got hired by Houston. Like it's absolutely accurate. It's the way that it is. Like he is a super smart processor of basketball at the end of the day. And, you know, I'm looking here at just what the defensive rating numbers were when Carter and Bamba were out on the court. The problem with the Carter Bamba lineups was offense. It wasn't defense. Yeah. Like they couldn't really figure out the spacing because while Mo, he can shoot a little bit, teams don't really respect him out there. They're pretty comfortable with him shooting, and he doesn't really pass it at a super high level. Like you don't get the like it's kind of the same thing. Like you watch Miles Turner all the time, right? Because you write for Indy Cornrows. Like it's a similar deal where, you know, because Miles doesn't have a lot of dexterity with the ball and like doesn't really dribble all that well, teams are just like, okay, we'll close out hard if we have to. He probably can't hurt us that way. But if he takes the shot, like we're kind of good with it regardless. And what that does is it kind of gums up the rest of the offense, even though he gets, you know, talked about as the shooter, right? It's kind of a similar effect with Mo Bamba in terms of the way that offense kind of functions with him, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the action is either dying or going in the hoop with him, and it can look great from play to play, but process wise, it never ends up being awesome. So I think him re-signing was actually one of the more kind of surprising things to me in free agency. Yeah. I'm interested to see I still think he's got utility. It's just where they're going, it's really odd. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, the team that I thought should have looked at him was Phoenix. Like I think Phoenix would have been interesting, like using Mo as like a backup center. And I like Mo. Like I think Mo can be a top 30 center in the league. It's just gonna probably not be here, and it's probably gonna need to be in like more of like a 5-out scheme with a lot of ball handling that works, because he does have real rim protection skill. He is like gonna make a lot of money playing basketball. Like he's really, really good. It's not really, really good, but like he's a good player. It's just like this fit, it is going to gum things up a little bit for Paulo and Franz and guys like that. To kind of close off the loop on the Magic, you kind of mentioned that you're going to be interested to see how these guys develop over the course of the next few years. I kind of think it's going to be fine. Like, I think that, like, because Franz is so good at moving without the ball, being unselfish, but also being efficient and processing the game quickly, knowing when it's his turn, being able to make good shot selection decisions, because Wendell Carter is incredibly smart and intelligent and processes things quickly, does all of the little things, incredible screener, has some shooting potential. I think that like you can just allow Paulo to grow naturally and organically into this high level role as being like the primary creator. And it doesn't take as much off the table of someone like Franz is what like the traditional usage would necessarily, I guess, especially given that Paulo is such a good passer. Like that was the thing that I said pre-draft. Like I think he was the best passing, like I think he was the best passer in the lottery that was taken. Like it was either him or Dyson Daniels. So I think that having 3 guys that can really pass, that are unselfish, that make plays, process the game really well, it's going to help when they try and figure out the role definitions of them in that team moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. And I mean, just like you hit on too, I think the last thing I'd have to say, I mean, like Powell is just going to be so good, man. Like I feel like
you had Paulo at 1, didn't you? You were a big...
Powell was 1 for me the entire way.
Yeah.
Like that's not trying to beat my chest, but like I just think like watching what he did last year, yeah, man, it was easy to like. I'm just so excited for him. He's that Magic team's gonna be so fun.
Yeah, no, I love Paulo. I'm excited for him. You know, I had him below Jabari and I had him below Chet, and we're not going to get to see Chet, and I'm a little bit disappointed about that.
Me too.
But I am excited for Paulo. Like Paulo is so good at basketball. He's so fun. The passing ability is just that thing that's like so real for him. But we've spent now 30 minutes talking about the Magic. Let's move on and talk about my second guy. Yeah, this is what this podcast is, right? Let's go to my second guy here. My second breakout player. I picked Devin Vassell. So I am a big Devin Vassell fan. I have been since pre-draft. He's developed though into something a little bit different than what I thought he would be. Like I thought he'd be more traditional 3-and-D. I didn't really love him as a ball handler. I thought he had like kind of a high dribble at Florida State. He's really improved though. Like the wingspan number on him is not super long. Like I think it's like a 6'9" wingspan, but because he plays with such bend, he gets the ball low to the ground. And because of that, he's really been able to, I think, make some leaps as like an actual playmaker with the ball in his hands from time to time. And he can keep the ball a little bit tighter as a ball handler now than, some of these other wings that, play a little bit more upright and struggle to kind of get by guys. And that bend also allows him to functionally kind of get the most out of his athleticism as a driver. Look, like, I'm not sitting here saying Devin Vassell is like a 25 point per game scorer. I'm not saying he is like some incredible all-star level piece, but I think we see Devin Vassell average something like 16, 17 points a game, largely because of role. He shoots 37, 38% from 3. He's a really smart defender who gets his arms into passing lanes and just kind of makes things happen. I think he has a really killer year, and I think that we're looking at him and Keldon Johnson kind of as like the clear wing combo of the future in San Antonio, and one that maybe makes their future look a little bit brighter than, what this season's record will look like.
Yeah, I love the mention of Vassell. And it's funny too, because even like last year, like he's almost the guy that I feel like was there. I think it was if Pop had been willing to give him a little bit more leeway, I think he's there. I love what you mentioned about the bend, because I think that's what always stands out to me the most about him. Like, obviously his screen navigation on defense is impeccable, but I think like you're mentioning, it's the screen navigation as a ball handler that's really impressive too. Like, it's obviously not the same player, but he kind of has that same, like, I can't remember which, somebody explained it to me as like frogginess and like talking about Bradley Beal. And I think
Yeah,
Devin
yeah,
Vassell
yeah.
has that kind of same ability to just like be incredibly like limmy and flexible laterally. And a lot of guys just have trouble keeping up with that because it's not very common. Um, I love that shout. Yeah, I think a lot's going to depend on how much more he can get to the rim. Because a lot, like,
Yeah.
he's got a big penchant for pull up twos. And I think like what he's shown as a shooter already, like, I think he's a lot better than the numbers indicate. And that's saying a lot. I mean, he shot 36% on good volume last year, but um, I think just adding in more and more of that. I think, again, like even last year, we saw more and more tempo and pacing in the half court. I really like him as, again, not someone who's going to be like an all around great playmaker, but somebody who probably averages 4 or 5 assists per game at his peak, because he's just good at continuing to move the ball. You know, he's really good, especially even with like Jakob Poeltl last year. I think it's hard for anybody to not find good rhythm with Jakob Poeltl because he's such a good screener. But he was
Speaking of
really
best screeners in the NBA, right?
yeah,
When we talk
he's
about
right
Wendell
about
Carter.
there. Yeah. And like, I think, I mean, yeah, I'm a believer with Vassell. I think the biggest thing I want to see from him this year is probably just even more physicality. Like, I'm interested to
Yeah.
see what his ability was to not incredibly, to meaningfully add like core strength and just weight in general. Because I think even on defense, like, he can get bullied at the point of attack at times. And he can get smothered at the rim a little bit just because of contact. And I think if he can improve on that, like, that's going to be absolutely huge.
You got yelled at earlier this week by a lot of Spurs fans because
Yeah.
the number one thing that you're interested in this year, I think you said something like, what do the Spurs look like? Or like,
Yeah.
who
My
are the
exact quote
Spurs?
was, what the
Right?
fuck are the
Like,
San Antonio Spurs? And I
yeah.
meant that in a good way. I look up
Yeah.
and down this roster. I love what they have assembled. I have no idea how it all fits together. I have no idea what the hierarchy is. Like, that's what's so interesting to me too. Because like last year it was clear. It's like, okay,
Definitely.
this is DeJounte Murray's team. This year, like, are we going to get a massive Primo breakout? I probably wouldn't bank on that. I like Primo, but again, he's just so raw. But like, again, like, I would definitely bet on the Vassell thing happening. Like, we already saw what Keldon did last year, but he's going to be out for a little bit now.
Yeah.
And then you just have, like, I love Malachi Branham. I'm not biased just because I live 20 minutes away from St. Vincent St. Mary's, but like, yeah, I mean, like, again, just up in like Blake Wesley. Blake Wesley's going to play probably more at the G League. I think Malachi's probably going to play more at the higher.
Yeah, like that's the thing that is weird with the Spurs.
Yeah,
Because they tend to bring their young guys along so slowly. And
exactly.
it's,
But it's
you
like
know, is
this
it
year, you know?
right? Like, is it because they have always had vets and Pop would prefer to play vets and like would prefer the continuity that allows for? Or is it a circumstance where they just like didn't have the need to? And now that they have
Yeah.
the need to potentially play their most talented players, is that what happens? I have no fucking idea. Like, I have no idea what this is going to look like this year. You could tell me that Branham plays, 400 minutes this year, or you could tell me he plays 1,700 minutes this year because things open up for him and he has a real opportunity. I have no idea what to expect. And that makes this fun, right? Like, you just kind of think about the fact. So like Keldon has a shoulder injury. It doesn't seem that serious from what I gather, right? Like, it seems like he's going to miss maybe a little bit of the start of the year, right? Like, am I missing something there?
No, I don't think you're missing anything. I think he just like
Yeah.
separate it or something, and he had to get it checked out. But yeah, I mean, he's not supposed to miss too much time, so we should be fine.
Yeah, like I think we're gonna be fine there, and like I think that maybe we get like more Romeo Langford maybe than you and I would prefer. Maybe you get a little bit more. Honestly, like I'm not real enthused about like rookie Blake Wesley experience in the NBA. I think
even Branham too, because like Branham's tough because like I
Yeah.
think he's gonna have like and I love Malachi, but like his defense was pretty rough last
Really
year.
bad, really bad.
And he's
Talked
gonna.
about
I
it a
mean,
lot.
even watching it, I mean, it was very much like watching young DeMar DeRozan in some ways.
Yeah.
He's gonna cook somebody in the mid range, and then he's gonna get his ass beat on the perimeter on the other end.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just so much here, but also like I need to know how it all fits together because I have no idea right now. And like somebody in the comments mentioned Sohan, and like I like Jeremy Sohan a lot. I was like pretty surprised Spurs picked him because to me he's much more
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, like I mean I think he makes sense, but especially with Chip England leaving too, I was a little bit surprised. Just given, like this is a guy who I think makes a lot less sense to me if you can't make his shot if you can't figure out a shot, which is why I
Yeah.
ended up being like more back end of the lottery with him. But he's just really good at basketball and the defense is really fun. It's like, I don't know. I just look at this team and there's so many guys who are weird off guards and like kind of smaller forwards. And I have no idea how it's all going to fit together. And I want to see it so bad. And I think I'm probably going to
Yeah.
watch more Spurs game than just about anybody this year.
Yeah, like it's funny. Like I really strongly considered Trey Jones for this because I was like, okay, they need like an adult and someone who will organize them. And like I at least know Trey will organize them and make them like look, he can only do so much defensively being like a small point of attack defender, but like he'll at least give effort and he'll make it a little bit harder for teams to get in and out of sets at the top. Like I don't know, like if Trey Jones averaged, 12 points, 7 assists, and was like a good defender, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I think he probably really establishes himself as like a real strong NBA player this year. I really like Trey Jones, but I always have. I had him as like a top 20 guy pre-draft. I don't know. Like this is a weird team. And then there's like the Jakob Poeltl trade potential hanging over it. Do they keep Doug McDermott? Do they keep, Josh Richards? Like, I don't know. I don't know what this team is going to look like. And I think that your question, what the fuck are the Spurs? Aptly put. But the thing that I feel most confident in is that Keldon Johnson, when he gets back, will probably average 20 points a game. And Devin Vassell is going to be like one of their starting wings and be a very high level breakout guy this year, just because he's going to get opportunities. We're going to get to see him play at a high level. All right, Mark, your second guy. Let's go.
So I hinted it a little bit earlier, but Evan Mobley for me, and I know I prefaced by saying I didn't really want to consider a lot of second year guys, but it's interesting because this was like a big thing that I was thinking about last week, and I've thought about it a couple of times. I feel like so often when we're like projecting out how good a team is going to be in the next year, there's just a tendency to look at guys like who have already had like an impact, especially straight up as their first rookie year. Like there's more. We're going to look at guys like OG Anunoby and say, well, we haven't seen him do it, so maybe he can do it. Instead of saying, well, we've seen this guy do things already. It just makes sense that he's on that track. So I think when you're looking at like quote unquote most improved and how those things are going to play out, like I feel like that's a really heavy factor. Like obviously there's some expectations come into play for sure. Like OG Anunoby was not drafted anywhere close to where Evan Mobley was. And that's not meant as like a comparison between the two. It's more just like thinking in terms of like OG is always getting when he becomes the shot creating wing. I think for me, that's just Mobley's development this year is almost under talked about in what the Cavs can be, because I think so often everybody's like, okay, well, if Isaac Okoro just becomes a starting level wing, which I do believe in Isaac taking steps this year. But they're like, that's what makes the Cavs hit that higher level where they make the second round of the playoffs and maybe they have a chance to make the conference finals. To me, I look at it and I'm like, yes, that would be awesome. And I think that's going to have a big impact. But what if Evan Mobley takes a step from like top 35 to top 15, top 20 player? And I think that's feasible this year, honestly. Like, just in terms of, going back and watching a bunch of his games and watching things in general. So we talked about some of the best screeners in the NBA. Like, Evan Mobley's one of the worst screeners in the NBA. And that's been a thing with him for a while. And that's more just by choice than by like, I think a lot of people chalk up to him just being skinny, and no, he just doesn't embrace contact very often. And I think that's something that he can definitely improve on. I know he added weight over the offseason. It's just like a little small margin thing like that to me, he was a good roller last year, but I think just improving as a screener, embracing more contact, especially having Donovan and Darius. Like Donovan is one of not a great guard screener, but like he's so effective in ghost actions and things like that can really damage a defense that I think you just open up even more if Evan is that much better as a screener. And even more so, though, like I think there are ways to really get him just more touches. And I think to me, like this season, JB Bickerstaff is already a good coach for sure, but like in terms of figuring out how good of a coach he is, I think is where I want to see what happens offensively and defensively this year. But I think because they really can, if they lean into what their funkiness is, I think they can really just kind of blow people away. Like if you just have more of, okay, we're going to run out in transition, but let Mobley handle the ball because he's good enough to do it. Not even just, it doesn't have to just be straight line drives coming up in transition. And you have a quick back screen from Darius Garland in an empty corner, or from Donovan Mitchell in an empty corner. Like, that stuff is effective and it's really good. It's simple things that you can implement and do more of that they did a little bit last year that I think they can do way more of this year. And I think, like, again, a lot's going to depend on the jumper, but everything I've heard out of Cleveland and base that we've seen from Evan's offseason was built on working on his jumper and continuing to improve on that. I think if there is just like even a small incremental growth in what his shooting is, we're looking at just a pretty groundbreaking player. I get like way too excited talking about Evan Mobley, but
I think Evan's a stud.
Yeah. I think he makes an all-star team this year.
So let's do this. You talked a lot about the offense, and I want to get back to the offense, but it's trivia time here, folks. Who is the last second-year player to make an all-defense team?
Ooh, that's a good question. Can I get some sort of hint? Because I can already tell you I can't get off the top of my head.
He was not a big.
He was not a big. Oh, wow. Okay. A second year. Was it DeJounte Murray? No,
it was DeJounte Murray.
It was DeJounte. Okay, I thought it was
DeJounte Murray in 2018. So I kind of have been doing a lot of research into this idea of what is an unreasonable expectation for Evan Mobley on defense this year, right? Like, I've said multiple times, I think Evan Mobley had the best defensive rookie season, since Tim Duncan, basically, like in 25 years. And just like incremental growth toward being what he, I think, will be when he's 24, probably makes him an all defense guy this year. But is that unreasonable? Like, when was the last time a second year guy made it? Like, for the most part, you see these players take a leap in year 4. Year 4 tends to be when guys make, like Jaren Jackson, Mikal Bridges, Bam Adebayo, I think even Ben Simmons. Like, year 4 of after they've been drafted, in Ben's case, is when the all defense leap happens. Given that I just said that Evan is starting from like a higher level than most of these guys are, do we think it's year 3 or do we think it's year 2? Like, I don't know. I think it's hard. I think it's like kind of hard to determine, but I do think that there is a lot of space for defensive growth from Evan this year, just with strength. Like, if he is stronger through his core, it's going to make a big difference. Like, it's huge for him if he can be a primary rim protector. That, like, they can play consistently at the 5, let alone, like, you're going to play Jarrett 30 minutes a game, right? But like, if you want to close with Mobley at the 5 because a team is going super small and you want to play hyper switchable, and you feel like Evan can actually anchor around the basket, get big rebounds, like not fly in and rely on his length all the time, that's a big difference maker for them as a team. And obviously, like, look, I know that Jarrett got a lot of plaudits last year defensively, and he deserved them. I thought his breakout, more so than even on offense, came on the defensive end, because he got so much smarter in terms of like being steady in drop actions and not chasing everything around the basket. He was very chasey with Brooklyn, which is, I think, part of the reason why the Nets got a little bit frustrated with him and why Jacques Vaughn made a bad decision to start DeAndre Jordan over him, despite the fact that Jarrett, even with those tendencies, was better than DeAndre. But I think that with Jarrett, like, he just improved so much around just his technical craft and the way that he thinks about the game. It's still Evan, though, that unlocks everything that they do defensively. Like, that's the marginal difference. He is the guy that makes things work for them in terms of playing as big as they want to. And I would think they continue to play big again for a lot of minutes, because I would think that like Dean Wade is going to play a lot at the 3. I would think that like they run out some Evan Mobley, Kevin Love, Jared Allen lineups from time to time. Like they're going to do weird things. They like to play big. Evan's the guy that unlocks it and allows that, which is why I think he's like the clear, like all defense guy on the Cavs. Now, you brought up the offense, and if he shoots it, I think it's like kind of curtains. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like it's more complicated than that. I know that like you brought up all of the little stuff, the screening, the ability to kind of process the game in terms of cutting, even I think there's room for improvement on. And look, you're probably right to care more about that stuff, because he's not going to have the ball in his hands even potentially as much as he did last year with Donovan Mitchell entering the fray, right? And with Karis LeVert being there for a full season, and them eventually, hopefully getting Ricky Rubio back, who is really, really valuable for them over the course of, the first half of last season before he tore his ACL. I wonder if he has the ball in his hands as much, but like if he's a threat with the ball in his hands, even it really unlocks so much of their offense. Like if teams don't have to collapse, or teams can't feel like they can collapse down in the paint when Donovan drives, when Darius drives, but particularly when Donovan drives, because Darius is such a lights out 3-point shooter from 25, 28 feet away from, if they feel like Evan is in the corner and he's going to knock down a 3, if they feel like, there's even like a little pick and pop action. I mean, it's wild. You know what I mean? There is so much to do here.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so enticing, because like he already has the handle at his size and the fluidity to attack on drives. And even if he didn't, like, he gets to the rim in 2 strides. Like it's insane. Like if he catches the ball in the corner, even if somebody's sagging off of him, okay, if you take a half step in the wrong direction, he's just face cutting you and he's dunking. Like it's kind of ridiculous. Yep. But the passing ability already. I think there was a stretch, I wrote about this last year when I'm trying to remember who was out. I think it was when Darius was out. So they ran a ton of the offense through him. Obviously, his efficiency tanked. Like I think he was like 2 percentage points below league average true shooting. Boohoo, I don't care. Like he did a ton of stuff. Like there was a game against Detroit where I think he took 20 shots right about. Did a ton of stuff with his exactly. Like that's the kind of stuff that you love to see. And I think for me,
studio space.
What made it so enticing and exciting to me is like there wasn't any kind of like barrier to that level of aggression. And I think that's one of the things that was frustrating about Evan's draft year was just because he's really quiet and he's not a super demonstrative player on court. Like there's a tendency to say that he's not aggressive and stuff. And I think that runs counter to how he plays basketball. So I think that it's on the table for him. It might not happen this year, but I think it's coming. And I'm just like, I think I'm very much on the trend of looking at him and Cade and just saying they're going to be all-time greats. Like that's kind of where I'm at with their trajectories already. And I can't put a cap on what he's going to do.
Yeah. And you know what, like, here's the other thing too. I kind of was talking about what it looks like when all of the starters are out there, right? Like, there are going to be minutes where Evan doesn't play with Jarrett and where Evan only plays with one of Donovan and Darius, right? And he's going to get more opportunity with the ball in his hands. I think that's what I would like to see more. Mm-hmm. Like in the moments where one of Darius and Donovan are on the court, give Evan just a little bit more leeway to like kind of, grab and go on the break and try and initiate offense that way. Like maybe you run like a very quick like action where he's sprinting up the court and then tries to find Darius Garland as a trailer or something weird like that, like on a dribble handoff, right? Like like with Darius, like it can be finding Darius as a trailer 30 feet away from the basket and just pulling up from 3, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that I think could be really, really hard to defend. I don't know. I think you're right on Evan. I think you're 100% right on Evan. I would. So do you think Evan is an all-star this year? Is kind of your
I think it's possible. Yeah, I look at this team and I think it's going to be interesting just to see how things play out with the rest of the big room. It's something I have to do in my head, but I think I think he's going to take that jump.
Interesting. Okay. I dig it. I'm with it. Yeah. Like I wonder if the counting numbers are as good. Yeah. You know what I mean? Just because Donovan's there.
It could definitely be a dependent on defense year. Like for me, I mean, I thought he should have made all defense last year. I'm still salty that he didn't, but Like I think it's just kind of a guarantee for me this year that he's going to make it. Which sounds like asinine to say it like that, but I mean just with how good he was already last year.
Yeah, like
It's
I know what you're saying. Like in my mind, I thought the same thing, and I had this conversation out loud on the podcast with Cole Huff, and I was like, yeah, like no brainer, like all defense. He's 25-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year. Like, is that good? And then I went through historically, and I was like, shit, it does tend to be like year 4 when these guys do it. Maybe he is ahead of the curve, and he is ahead of the curve, like no question. But like, how far? That's my question. Like, how far ahead of the defensive aging curve is he? He's pretty far, but I don't know. It's if he makes all defense year 2, like we're talking about one of the 10 best defenders of all time, potentially. Like that's the ballpark he's in if he does that.
I'm there.
I don't know.
I'm there. I'll put it right now. Not to get like way too on my high horse, but I think by his 5th year in the league, I think he's gonna be the best defensive player in the NBA. I think trending towards that. Yeah. So I think probably not even that big of a thing to say, but it's on the way.
Yeah, and look, like these accolades that I'm bringing up are like somewhat arbitrary, right? Like Tim Duncan never won Defensive Player of the Year, and Tim Duncan was the best defensive player in the league for a long time. Draymond Green has won 1 Defensive Player of the Year award, and there's no more valuable playoff defender than Draymond Green, right? So like, it's tricky. Last guy on my list, and I have like 8 more guys on my list. Is the problem? I'll take Pat Williams because when he got back from injury last year, he was really good, like really, really good. There were multiple games in the playoffs where he had 20 points. He was really kind of just looked a lot more comfortable. Looked like the game had slowed down for him, even though he's still very young. Like he is, I think 21, like returns 21, like right around the start of this season. I'll look that up while I'm talking, but like he is just such an enormous dude. And I think that one thing about him when he was at Florida State was, I don't want to say he was, maybe like he was heavy is the best way to put it. He was a little bit heavier on his feet, a little bit heavier, just in terms of the way that like he operated. I don't want to say that has gone away totally because I don't think it has, but I think he has like leaned out and gotten into like
really interesting. Like I think this is something that I've tried to think about more in terms of like looking at athleticism, especially functional athleticism. He reminds me a ton of his movements in Jeff Green. Like you see a lot of things that he does that are like, that's a small forward. And then there are other movements where like, that's a forward. And like, I think I totally agree with you. He shed some of that last year. There's still like moments where, it's more like his athleticism comes in bursts rather than being like a consistent thing. Yeah, sorry, that was just a very random tangent, but I was thinking about that.
No, I think you're right. No, you're 100% right. Like his athleticism is one of the hardest things, but the thing that is different between him and Jeff is like his shoulders are so fucking big that when he hits someone, he moves them. Like Jeff Green is strong, and like Jeff Green has like played in the NBA for 15 years and has been like he's carved out like a good career, even though it wasn't what people wanted out of a top 5 pick. Like when Pat Williams hits you like in a mismatch, you are going backward. He, even with like having gotten into better shape, he is a legit like mismatch guy. I don't know if Jeff Green was ever like a true mismatch guy definitely. In the way that like
interesting too, because he never had like those wide shoulders like Pat does. Like he's always been like a little bit more narrow. It's interesting. Like especially too, like you're talking about with Pat, like his core strength is kind of ridiculous too. Like I mean, so seeing Pat in person, he's got some of the biggest quads I think I've ever seen on a human being.
He's just huge. Like he's 6'7". Like he's like almost like a 220-pound like tight end almost. Like it looks, it's weird, but like he moves better than like a tight, like not to say like tight ends aren't athletic, but like he moves more functionally like on an NBA court than like a tight end would. Like you remember watching, like you might be a little bit too young for this, but like, do you remember watching Antonio Gates at Kent State? Like
I remember watching Antonio Gates with the Chargers, but no, not Kent State.
Yeah, like when you watch Antonio Gates was like fucking awesome at Kent State as a basketball player. And I have like, disaster memories of watching that NCAA tournament run, being a Pitt fan. But like It's you watched fucking Antonio Gates, and it was just like, oh my God, this guy is huge. You can see how he'd be a football player. Pat Williams has like a lot of that strength stuff, but he moves more functionally and flexibly, I think that's a word, than like a guy like a Antonio Gates does. Like he can actually like kind of move around. I don't like bringing up Kawhi with anyone, but it's probably the closest thing just physically that I've seen to Kawhi. I don't think that the skill development is ever going to be what Kawhi's was, because Kawhi is just fucking crazy in terms of work and the way he's like improved the shot. He's become one of the most lethal shooters in the league after being like a total liability pre-draft as a shooter. But it's similar in the way that he just like moves people. I'm glad you brought up the quads, because like it's both the shoulders and the lower body strength. Like he just moves dudes. And I think that the Bulls are going to need a little bit more of that this year. Like with Lonzo being out for however long Lonzo is going to be out for, I would imagine that like, yeah, you see Caruso play some point, but also you probably see like quite a bit of like Zach LaVine trying to initiate offense here and there, as opposed to like focusing on scoring as much as we've seen Zach LaVine focus on scoring, because he's an incredible scorer. But like for their offense to work, they need somebody that can get like DeMar the ball in the right spot. They can get Vooch like the ball in the right spot. Like I feel like if he moves to more of like a playmaking, ideal, it opens up a lot for Pat to be able to like, just kind of create mismatches and be like a screener, like 1-4 screener. Like they played small a lot with DeMar at the 4 last year because Pat was out. I wonder if they could play bigger with guys like Zach LaVine playing the 1 and like almost, Caruso playing the 2, I guess, and then DeMar and Pat. And you could run Pat as like the screener, and then, Vooch is like the corner spacer a decent amount, and get a ton of like really fun mismatch opportunities for Pat.
Yeah. So my biggest thing with Pat that I want to see this year, obviously just more aggression within the offense. I think he was put in a tough place, just the way that things worked out last year. And I totally agree with you with seeing more of that aggression down the stretch when he did come back. It's just, can his hips get a little bit more loosened up? Because I think that's his biggest thing for me right now. That's like, because like everything in terms of the strength, the physicality, I totally agree with the Kawhi aspect, but it's just the changing directions is just, he's gotten better at it since he was at Florida State, but it's still like such an issue if the second that he gets hit with any kind of hesitation or crossover that goes into a new direction, he's scrambling.
That's why, like, so we have a question here from Gregory Castillo in the comments on YouTube asking, do you see Pat as that level of defender? I don't right now, for exactly what Mark is saying here.
Yeah. And I think, well, that's part of what will be interesting with this year, because like they're going to have to, I think that they, again, like they can be a quality defense scheme wise. And a lot of it's going to be obviously having to play ice, doing a lot of stuff with Vooch closer to the level and just trying to use their size to really thwart things. But again, like I think Pat taking that next step, hopefully, and having unlocked maybe some more flexibility, I think would be really huge for them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's, look, I haven't really given like a number on what I think Pat's going to do, right? Like I would say like 15 to 16 points a game, maybe 5 rebounds and a couple of assists. Like I think that would be a breakout for him. Maybe it's like 17 points per game, something like that. Yeah. I haven't asked you this yet, but like we did this on Prospect Wars with Spins and I. Would you take him or Keegan Murray long term, knowing that Keegan is like a year older?
Oh, that's a good question.
Both number 4 overall picks, both guys that like people had some questions about going number 4. That's a fun one.
I think, and this is not meant as a detriment to Pat, but I think I would probably take Keegan, just because like what Keegan does as a shooter is kind of nutty to me. And he's so good at impacting the game without having the ball in his hands too. Like that was part of what made him such, not saying easy to project to the next level would be the wrong way to put it, but like I think I was just always comfortable with saying Keegan's gonna be a good NBA player, just because He's going to be one of the best offensive rebounders at his position. He's going to be really good cutting and moving within the flow of the offense. And I'm not quite there with Pat yet. That's like because the Bulls they're just so tough because especially like if he's not going to be a player who's able to find his own offense within an offense that is pretty isolation heavy at times, it's just going to be funky. But I definitely am there with you in terms of him taking that leap.
Okay. I agree with you. I would take Egan for what it's worth as well. I kind of said that on Prospect Wars. It's close, but I would take Egan. Okay. You're up with the last breakout player on your list. And look, like we'll do like a couple minutes at the end on other guys we want to talk about.
Good. My last breakout guy is not the Wolf that most people are going to take. It is not Jaden McDaniels. I'm taking Jalen Nowell. I think that we already saw some play from Jalen Nowell last year that made me I loved everything Chris Finch did last year, but the one thing I did not like was minimizing Jalen Nowell's role. And I think part of it was just because they had so many guys that were he really blew up because Pat Bev was out, if I remember correctly. When he had that stretch right before the All-Star break. It was either Pat Bev or D'Lo was out. I can't remember. But this team really needs to improve their rim offense in general this year. Like they have so much is coming from being a 3-point reliant team. And I think that really hurt them in the playoffs when they played against the Grizzlies. Like they're a team, if you can really shut down any of their stuff that's getting downhill, and especially too, like they're a sneakily terrible screening team. And that'll change with Gobert. But like Cat is such a bad screener at his size. Like it's one of my
all
biggest
slips. Like that's the whole thing. Like he's
everything slips and But I think when I look at Jalen, like he is pretty much the only guy on the roster who I think you can say is a true, not even just 3-level scorer, because I think that can be thrown around too much. And it obviously depends. Like his shot was really good last year, but is that going to stay the same? Because there have been some variances in it. But he's somebody who has like the pacing, the tempo, the athleticism to hit all 3 levels, is a really good craft scorer around the rim. And more importantly, he just gets there. But then he's also a good enough playmaker to really, at least as a pick and roll read guy, like he's going to hit the corners if they're open. He has some manipulation to his game. And I really believe in him with a roller. Like that's who I'm most excited to see play with Gobert. Like obviously D'Lo, I think with Gobert is going to be essential, but I think especially in bench lineups, when you can see Jalen Nowell hopefully take over that role as more of the backup point guard, even though he's more of a combo than a true point guard. But like I think that they really need that blend of having the ability to get to the rim with a ball handler, not just through dives and cuts, because it's just hard to live off that, especially in the playoffs. I believe in
and like for as much as we get excited about like Anthony Edwards being like this power driver, he doesn't do it all that often.
Exactly.
Like,
and I don't think that's going to change this year, because that's always been Ant. So it's like I just don't know that it's going to change. But
yeah, like
not to be like Ant's obviously very good, but
yeah, we fucking love Anthony Edwards here. It's, other than some of the comments he makes that are disgusting, but like we love Anthony Edwards on the court. He is also a guy that tends to step back a little bit more than you want and doesn't like use the full force of his power athleticism in the way that you would hope. Jalen Nowell, like how much do you remember about Jalen Nowell at Washington? Because that would have been like 2018, 2019.
That's before that was even before I like really,
right.
that's before I was covering basketball, but that's also before I like, was really like getting into scouting too. So I do not remember him from UW, but I have talked to people who said that they were fans of him at UW.
So what he was, I also liked him at Washington. I think I had him at like 40 on my board, something like that, like right around that range. He was more of a mid-range gunner. Like that was his whole thing. Like he was like a mid-range assassin at Washington. And then his second year when he won Pac-12 Player of the Year, he kind of expanded out. It wasn't super high volume from 3, but he hit like 40% from 3. And then the next year he went into the G League after, I think he got drafted pretty late by the Wolves, if I remember correctly. I don't think he was undrafted. Yeah, he went 43rd overall. So he gets drafted in the second round by the Wolves, and they put him in Iowa, if my memory serves, because I think that was the G League team at the time. So he goes to Iowa and he hits threes at volume. Like I think he hit like 45% on like 8 threes a game or something like that. I'll look up the number here in a minute. But like, it was like, wait, like what did Jalen Nowell do? Like, has he become like an actual volume 3-point shooter? And then the second year it was like, oh wait, like now he's adjusted into like being more of an attack oriented player. And then last year it was like, oh wait, no, he's like just slashing now. Like it's like a Jordan Poole kind of thing where when you watch Jordan Poole at Michigan, it was all threes and it was all like perimeter based stuff. And then really improved his craft as a ball handler and just started getting all the way to the basket and like was a somewhat below the rim finisher, but like creative in a way finisher too. Like,
and he's really strong.
It's been a weird,
using like bump offs and stuff.
Yeah, he's always had really good balance, which is why I think he like operated so often in the mid range as a scorer at Washington. Like his balance has always been really, really high level, which has allowed him, I think, to transition that into being like such a threatening ball handler a lot of the time. I love Jalen Nowell. I'm so glad you brought up Jalen Nowell. He's not really someone I thought about for this. And like that's on me. I kind of love Jalen. Yeah, interesting. It's been an interesting trajectory for Jalen, I would say, because if he is like a 30, you said like he's like, you don't want to say 3-level scorer lightly. If he like kind of puts together all of the things we've seen throughout like the disparate parts of his career, so like mid-range assassin at Washington, 3-point gunner in the G League, and then last year like guy who puts pressure on the basket more often, there's a lot there that actually like could be real 3-level scorer in the way that you're kind of envisioning.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if he's able to, like, if the shot, because I mean, what made it impressive, like he was good as a catch and shoot player. He was doing stuff off the dribble really well. If he's able to do that in similar volume this coming year, and is able to just, I think obviously the defense needs to tighten up. I think that was why he mostly got crunched out of the rotation last year.
He's never really been good on that end either, for what it's worth.
And I think that there's room for it to at least improve, like marginally at least, so he can be, closer to being at least like a slightly below neutral defender instead of being like a pretty bad defender. And it's not like awful, but like it, especially with how aggressive they played last year, like it needed to be better. So I'm interested to see what that can look like this year. But he's somebody I would bet on, because I just like having guys who are capable of scoring like that and being a real playmaker too. Like that's like, not that he's going to, I wouldn't necessarily say that he's going to become a starter in the NBA, but I think if he's able to really continue developing his shot out the way that it has, like, yeah, that's a guy that's going to get paid close to starter money. So I'm interested
and
to see how
that's the big thing that I was going to bring up. You brought up getting paid. You're betting on contract year Jalen Nowell.
Yeah. I think it's a good bet.
Pretty good bet, I think, because he has not gotten paid a lot yet. And he will get paid, I think, at the end of this season. Okay. So let's kind of run through some other names that we had on our longer lists, because I know both you and I had longer lists. And we have like 10 minutes here until the Scoot Vic game starts, and I don't want to go past that.
No
the guy that I think I would have bet on you having 2 guys on your list before we did this. Maybe 3, because Wendell Carter was interesting. I thought you might have thought Wendell Carter broke out last year, and that you would have put Jalen Suggs on your list. So I didn't put Suggs on mine, and I didn't put Precious on my list either, because I thought you would pick
Precious was my 4th guy. I almost brought up Precious, and it was hard not to, because especially it's wild seeing who he was at Memphis to where he's at now. Like it's still very much like same player, but just the way that things are starting to play out. Like I think the shooting,
it's the way Toronto has developed him in a big way. In Miami to an extent as well, like 2 of the best developmental situations in the NBA.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as much as the offense gets pointed out, like him being, I think, he shot 39.2%, almost 4 per game after the All-Star break last year. But like a friend of mine, really good reporter up in Toronto, Samson Folk, who covers the Raptors, wrote a really good piece on just how freaking impressive his defense was. Like he is the answer for them at big for the most part. And I think him continuing to grow as he is offensively, like, yeah, I'm there. I'm excited for this year for him.
Yeah, people bring up the idea of Jakob Poeltl for them a lot, and I've done it previously. I don't really think they need him. It's kind of where I'm at on it. Like it wouldn't hurt to get Jakob Poeltl. He'd be valuable. But I think Precious is actually the answer for them at the 5, especially with given how they want to play. He's super switchable. He's long. He does protect the rim at a pretty high level. Defensive player of the year in conference, or no, the AAC when he was there. That wasn't Conference USA. My brain just broke there for a second. Defensive player of the year in the AAC for a reason. Has transitioned that into being an effective defender at Miami. It felt like in Miami, it was purely just, I'm athletic. I'm going to run around. I'm going to switch. I'm going to be energetic. Last year, it felt like there was like a method to the madness in a way, right? Where he still brought the energy, still brought the motor, but seemed to diagnose things just a little bit quicker defensively at a high level. I know that like people love to talk about like all defense for Scotty Barnes this year. Precious is the guy that like, if there's going to be a leap from one of their super young guys, it's going to be Precious, I think, that would go all defense, not Scotty. And that's not like a slight at Scotty. Scotty is great. It's more that I think Precious is more important to what they do defensively, and OG, obviously. Like OG is going to get the tough matchups more than Scotty is defensively. I think that those two guys will allow Scotty to flourish more offensively and just kind of be able to wreak havoc with his length defensively. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, the Raptors are just going to be sort of wild to me. And even like you mentioned too, on hitting on like them not needing to go after Jakob. I'm planning on doing something on like potential impact rookies around the league. I think Koloko is going to play a decent amount for them. Like he's really raw, obviously like offensively, but he does good stuff defensively. I think like in terms of just having somebody like catching the ball, one thing. But having somebody who can be like he fits a lot of what they want to do.
He does.
So I'm interested to see what that looks like.
Yeah,
I'll run through some of my guys real quick. I thought about Denny Avdia. I'm just not there. I went back and I watched his stuff from Eurobasket again today because he was at the top of my mind. Part of it is like the Washington Wizards are just that whole team is so weird to me. But with him, like everything's still so left-hand inept. Like everything is right-handed, finishes, passing, dribbling. Like he did some really cool stuff with taking shots off the dribble at Eurobasket, but it wasn't at a super high level. Like it was good, but that's not stuff that he's going to take with the Wizards.
I don't think he can do that in NBA games.
Like I think he's going to keep getting better, but I still think there's a real ceiling to him becoming somebody who's a real secondary ball handler. In a way that's going to be meaningful. I thought about Onyeka Okongwu. I feel like he's just kind of obvious at this point too, because like he's going to be.
Yeah, I just worry about minutes as much as anything. Like I think he'll work his way into them, but I don't know. Like they're going to play John Collins at the 5 occasionally, right? Like you're going to play Clint Capella at the 5. I don't know. I just worry about minutes. Like if I was them, I'd probably just move Clint, but like for what and where, I don't know.
Yeah. No, exactly. It makes it funky. Who else did I have? As I always have every year, PJ Washington. More sparked on just because Steve Clifford has been like really exuberant talking about PJ Washington, which like Steve is not somebody who's just going to talk out of his ass about a player. So that makes me excited because I've really liked PJ's game for a while. And I'm interested to see how he looks. Like that's another thing to bring up. Like, what does this roster look like with Steve Clifford? Like, this is not a Steve Clifford roster at all. Bismack Biyombo's not there for the first time in Steve Clifford's career. What does that mean? So, and then the last guy
Steve, hold on. Let's pause on PJ real quick because PJ was my 5th guy.
Okay.
Behind Precious. Like Precious would have been 4. I didn't pick Precious because I thought you were going to pick him. Mm-hmm. And then PJ was the 5th guy. 100% Steve Clifford is just talking about him like crazy. Real role opens up because of the terrible, awful Miles Bridges allegations. And I just don't know what that roster looks like enough to where I could like fully invest in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
no, I get what you're saying.
And it's not a Steve Clifford roster. Steve Clifford is saying they're going to play up tempo, and like I guess some extent with LaMelo, you have to play up tempo. But Steve Clifford has never finished like in the top half of the league in pace. I don't I don't know. It feels
Yeah,
weird, right?
it's very wonky. I agree, and part of the reason I do get excited about it though is like I just think about all the forwards who like kind of weird combo forwards who have gotten good under Steve.
Yeah.
Like Marvin Williams had the best years of his career playing under Steve Clifford. Part of that is just like Marvin had been around for a while too, but like as much as MKG never worked out because of health reasons, like he became a pretty interesting player before some of the late injuries really sapped him of his athleticism.
Mhm.
I don't know. I just think that there's more there with PJ, and I'm interested to see what it looks like.
All right. You'd mentioned that you wanted to get to a couple other guys.
Oh yeah. Last guy I would hit on is probably Zeke Naji. I know Zeke's gotten really good
Yeah.
stuff from Mike Malone,
Yeah.
and he is. He was same thing with talking about Onyeka. Like I just don't know what minutes look like for him. Have Aaron Gordon, MPJ's back. Jeff Green is still going to be playing, even though he was weird for me last year. But like that whole team, there's just a lot of kind of paths that make it difficult for me to see him playing a ton, at least in a way that's going to make him a quote unquote breakout player. But I do think he's somebody I'm interested in, especially like he shot pretty well last year. I still don't see him as the switch big that they're trying to make him into.
Neither do I.
But he does do some things that are interesting. So I'll be interested in keeping tabs, but I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah, like every single year, a fan base becomes the internet, like, like the meme where it's like, this is going to make me the Joker. Like every year, a fan base becomes the Joker because DeAndre Jordan plays 17 minutes a game. This year, it's the Nuggets. And look, I would hope that Zeke can earn those minutes over DeAndre, but we have yet to see many examples of coaches being able to resist the pull of playing DeAndre Jordan. And I am skeptical that Mike Malone will be one of them, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. Seeing him play last night was, oh boy, that was awful.
I watched a bit of that game and I had some of the similar concerns that you do. And another guy that I thought you would pick, just knowing, where you write and everything, I thought you would have Isaiah Jackson on your list.
No, like I try to be unbiased with him, but it's just he's so raw, man. Like, it's tough too because like not that I wouldn't say I've gotten lower on him. Like he does a lot of things I'm really interested in, but he went from being somebody who looked like a really interesting guy at the four. Like if you can really mold out his shooting and try and work in some of the passing flashes, but they've already pretty much just thrown that to the wind, and he's going to be the backup five this year. So like I think he's interesting, obviously like really incredible athlete, but his best defensive scheme right now is switching because he's so lost playing in space most of the time. And it takes time for that stuff to come along, but he's in the Bruno Caboclo camp right now for me. Like he's a little bit of some time being away for me.
Yeah, I don't know that I would go that far where he's
like more like year away from being a year away. Like not, I would. He's better prospect wise, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Like it's interesting because I would assume they're gonna have to trade Miles Turner at some point, right? Like this is the year where they have to do it. And that is going to open up real minutes. There's no reason for them not to just give him 30 minutes a night once they move Miles Turner. Mm-hmm. So, and like I do like him more than I like the rest of their bigs upside wise, like Jalen Smith. I guess like, Terry Taylor is a strange big sort of like, I guess I would consider him a big, but I do like Isaiah Jackson's upside a little bit more than Terry's long term. So there's no reason to give him like less than 28 minutes a night if he can stay on the court in terms of foul trouble. I really think that like Tyrese Halliburton's just going to force feed him lobs all day, every day. It's just going to be like, okay, there's another 18-point game for Isaiah Jackson because he got 8 lobs from Tyrese Halliburton and ran the court once out in transition. I think that points, I think the counting number is going to be great. You're 100% right. Like, I mean, Rick Carlisle has his work cut out for him in terms of like the defensive awareness, but he has the tools. I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic about Isaiah Jackson. And I know that like Caitlin Cooper is like cautiously optimistic about Isaiah Jackson is like the way to put it. And I trust Caitlin with everything when it comes to basketball.
As everyone should. She's wonderful.
Yeah.
So.
I will say, I kind of made this case on the last podcast or 2 podcasts ago. I think there's like a non-zero chance Marvin Bagley's really good this year.
I had his name written down. I didn't end up bringing him
Yeah.
up, but I had his name written down. It's possible, man. I will never give up on Marvin Bagley. I went to Michigan State my first 2 years of school, and I was sadly there when that team got their asses handed to them by the Duke team in the Championship Classic to open the year. And Marvin was awesome. I remember watching that game and thinking, like, that's the number 1 pick. Like, that, obviously, because I'd never seen Luka before. But, yeah, like, I still believe.
Marvin is going to get a lot of open shots this year, given Detroit's spacing. Like, Bojan Bogdanovic is there. Sadiq Bey is there. Alec Burks is going to be back at some point from injury. Like, they have the shooters to be able to surround their bigs with around the court. They're optimistic, it seems like, about Isaiah Stewart maybe shooting this year. Mm-hmm. So you could theoretically play big around, Marvin Bagley at the 4, Isaiah Stewart at the 5. I think that probably doesn't work, but Dwayne Casey will probably try it at some point. Killian Hayes, I've heard better things about the shooting for sure than what we've seen previously. So maybe if he can transition to an off-ball role, that becomes interesting. Jaden Ivey can shoot off the catch. He's not a great pull-up shooter right now, but like, I think that if you give him an open 3 off the catch on like a second side action and you don't close out hard, like he can get you a little bit. But all this is to say that like with Cade Cunningham as the lead ball handler, if you run 1-5 actions with Cade and Bagley, Cade should be able to feed Marvin like 6 easy points a night. And from there, it's just like, what does Marvin do? Can Marvin maybe knock down a corner 3 here or there? If Marvin Bagley averaged 15 points a night, I wouldn't be surprised. Just purely from Cade, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, Mark, tell the people where they can find your work. Wait. We ask everyone here. What movies have you watched recently? What TV shows are you watching? What's going on?
Oh man, that's a good question. What have I watched recently? So I'm watching a million TV shows right now. Obviously Rings of Power, which I think I've been
5 episodes. I haven't watched the last episode yet.
It was the best one, so I will say that. I've probably been higher on it than I think most people have been. They've been pretty down on it, but like I grew up on that. I'm super into like the background lore and everything, so I really enjoyed it. Great British Bake Off. Obviously, that's my change of pace show. That new episodes every Friday. It's been fantastic. Really good for writing too. And then what was the other show? Obviously House of the Dragon. I've been watching as well. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I've definitely watched some random horror movies recently, but not as many as I'd like.
You're speaking to the choir here on random horror movies.
Did you see Nope?
I have seen Nope. Nope is great. Nope was very good. It was probably this is someone who thought like Us was pretty close to Get Out in terms of masterpiece. I thought Nope was probably like a step down from Get Out and Us, but I like a step down. Jordan Peele is still better than 97% of like what's working in the horror industry right now. Smile just came out here.
I need to see it. I'm hoping to do that this weekend.
Barbarian has not come out here yet, so I have not seen that, unfortunately. So basically I'm kind of working on these shitty like straight to streamer horror movies now here that Laura and I watch every freaking day, it feels like, because
I saw a very shitty horror movie recently. Actually, now I think about it, I watched Beast, the Idris Elba movie. That was horrendous, man. Like
I was disappointed.
I was very disappointed. Like not even that it looked like amazing in terms of what the trailers looked like, but like there was just like very little suspense. Like it wasn't really that terrifying. Even then, like it was, that was a low point last week watching that.
Yeah, didn't love that. I saw Bodies, which is like sort of a horror movie. Not It's like a horror comedy. The comedy aspects worked way better than the horror aspects of it, I thought.
Yeah.
Rachel Sennett is just like going to take over the world. I think she is amazing. Um, I saw Laura and I watched Control, which is this weird like one room horror movie that was not very good. We watched Devil's Workshop, which is just a very bad horror movie that nobody should watch. And then the other one that we watched this weekend was Men, the Alex Garland movie. I did not like it. I will understand it if people think that it's interesting and like thematically intriguing. I thought it was a nightmare. I thought that like the gender politics of it was a disaster, which is like the whole point of the film. I thought like Alex Garland is an incredible visual artist who paints like on a canvas almost with like film, but like you could like stop any singular shot in Men and it would literally be like a piece of art. It looks beautiful. I just thought that the movie was a not like giant piece of shit, but like was just not very good. In terms of like the gender politics of it all. It did not work for me. It's a movie like where Alex Garland is like looking at the camera going, women, I get it. I get it, guys. Like I'm there on your side. And it's just like, no.
Are you a dark comedies person at all?
Yeah, I can do them.
Okay. Have you ever seen Wolf of Snow Hollow? It's Jim Cummings.
Yes.
That's perfect. Oh god, that's one of my favorite movies I've watched in the last year.
So good. Yeah, I watched it like the weekend it came out on streaming on Amazon. It was perfect. It was so good.
That's one of the best movies I've seen.
Yeah, no, Jim Cummings is. I still haven't seen his new one from last year. What is it, Beta Test? But yeah, no, it's that was perfect. The thing, look, I haven't watched a ton of movies since the last podcast, but the thing I've been watching is like the Scandal in Poker with Robbie and Garrett. And I've literally been watching like Matt Berkey and like the Solve for Why crew literally break down Oliver Hands for like 5 hours at a time. Go do that. It's incredible. It's like honestly riveting, weirdly, to watch like this woman who I can't tell if she cheated or not. I tend to trust like the people that have a certain level of expertise in poker because I think they're all very like intelligent, high level, logical people, and they just can't. And I can't really understand. Like I played poker a lot more when I was young online, but like still like play occasionally. And like I can't understand the play she made with Jack High. I think it's like completely nonsensical. And the more that you watch it, the more you're like she had to have been cheating. But like you just watch her and like her mannerisms over like the 15 hours that she played at this like Hustler Casino, and it was just like, wait, what is happening? It's literally like a movie. It's incredible stuff. If anyone wants to look into cheating stuff, like I know that cheating in like games like this, like poker and chess, is all the rage right now, given the Hans Niemann allegations in chess. Everything involved with the like Robbie Liu and Garrett Adelstein stuff is like incredible to me and riveting.
Well, yeah, I need to check that out because I know absolutely nothing about that. So it sounds interesting.
If you know nothing about, you have to have like a level of like knowledge of poker to like get it totally. I think that like a lot of the people that like come into it without any knowledge of poker are like, wait, why do people think this woman is cheating? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, you're just attacking her. But like, if you know what's going on, it's like, maybe she cheated. Like it's not a certainty, and nobody should think it's a certainty, but like there's a real chance that she did. Okay. Mark, tell the people where they can find you. Tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on in your life.
Yeah. Easiest place to find me is just go on Twitter at @MG_Schindler. I work kind of everywhere. So best way is just connect with me on there. I always have my latest thing pinned at the top of my profile. Really appreciate you having me on, man. This was fun. We'll have to do it again sometime.
We will 100% do this again. That's Mark Schindler over there. I'm Sam Vestini over here. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. There's a chance I'm live on this channel in 2 hours again for the Scoot Vic show. I don't know. It'll depend on kind of what that game looks like and if I think it's worthwhile. But until next time, we'll talk soon.